So to have a simple apparent contract, we need agreement, that's offer and acceptance. We need to have intent, which we've dealt with both of them so far. The third thing, the important thing we need, is consideration. Let's have a little look at our espresso machine dilemma to think about that third element of a simple apparent contract. You'll remember so far we've looked at things like the fact these are businesses, so therefore we know in the commercial settings that we have intent. We've looked at things like invitations to treat versus an offer. We've looked at things like acceptance and noticed that we can't have qualified acceptances, etc. So the third element that we want to look at is consideration. Given the stuff up, I want it for free. They want to pay nothing for the coffee machine. Right? I'll put your logo there. If you don't, I'm going to blast my followers. This issue becomes relevant because in addition to agreement and intent, we need consideration, or both parties need to pay a price. So let's see what a price might entail and what is enough of a price for us to have a contract. So what differentiates a contract from a promise, even that you might intend to have legally binding, is that a contract involves both parties paying a price. So if I offer to give you my computer and you accept my offer, even if we intended it to be binding, it's not, because you're not paying a price for my computer. Now, when we say paying a price, we don't just mean money. And so here we have a range of things which are good consideration, which are considered the price that you pay. You could pay me $1,000. You could trade me your phone, give me something. You could do a service. You could wash my car. You could give a donation to someone else, right? You're still paying a price for your side of the bargain. And it can even include your agreement not to do something, your agreement not to sue me, your agreement not to appeal your result in BSB 250, for instance, would be a forbearance. You're giving away a right of appeal at good consideration. Having said that, not everything is good consideration. So we are going to have a couple of rules to help us work out whether we've met this element for a simple apparent contract. So as we're saying, an agreement is not a contract unless both parties to the agreement have paid, or a promise to pay is okay. So you pay or promise to pay a price. That's what we call consideration. It can be money, it can be goods. So you might have a bike that you agree, right? You could give a bike, the provision of a service. You could wash a car, give someone a massage. You could undertake an onerous obligation, refrain from doing something, so agree not to sue, or promise to do any of those things. It will be good consideration. So both parties must provide something of value. We're going to concentrate on two particular rules that might be a little confusing to people in business. The first rule, consideration must move from the promisee but not necessarily to the promise. The second, consideration needs to be sufficient but need not be adequate. And between these rules is an and, so we need both of these things to be in place. So the first rule, consideration must move from the promisee. What does that mean? Okay, so whenever we've got this contract, we've got two parties, person A and person B, right? I promise to give you my computer. You promise to wash my friend's car. So I'm going to give you my computer if you promise to wash my friend's car. And there's my very happy friend because you're going to wash their car. So notice, while person B, while you have to pay a price washing the car, it doesn't necessarily have to come back to me who's supplying the computer. So I'm the promisor, I'm promising to give you my computer, and you are the promisee. So you have to pay a price, but not necessarily to me. So the price you're paying is the car wash for my friend. So you are paying a price, but it's not to me. That's all this rule means. It means it doesn't need to be an exchange. but you do need to actually pay a price. So the second rule is consideration sufficiency versus consideration adequacy. Now, to understand this rule, we've got to understand the general principle of law here. The principle is people should be able to agree to whatever they want. No one really knows what something is worth to you. Like, what's a Big Mac worth to you? What's a Big Mac worth to you when you're super hungry versus when you're full? What's a Big Mac worth to you when you've never had one? Or if you're a vegetarian, it's probably worth not very much. So there's no inherent value in something. Value is what people think something is actually worth. So it's this very interesting dilemma that we've got, that you have to pay something, but it's up to you to decide how much you'll pay for something, and you should be free to bargain around that price. And that, of course, is baked into the idea of markets and our economy, etc., this freedom to choose how much you'll pay and how much you'll charge for something. So as a result, what you pay can be very trivial, and it will be enough. Consideration need not be adequate. So what that means is what you're paying doesn't actually need to meet the market expectation for the price. It just needs to be something. So let's have a bit of a deeper think about that. One way to think about the problem is you need to pay something. You need to pay some price, something. You can't pay nothing. If you pay nothing, you haven't given sufficient consideration. So what is nothing? Well, we have three things that the law considers nothing: a vague promise, past consideration, or a promise to do something that you're already obliged to do. They're considered nothing. They're considered insufficient consideration, and there won't be a contract if one of those three things is the source of your consideration. So if what you're promising is too vague, it's insufficient consideration. It's insufficient because it's what does it mean to promise to be nice, to cease complaining, to be a good student? These are vague promises without standards, so they're very difficult to enforce. They're so vague, they are uncertain, and so aren't considered good consideration. As in the case of Thomas and Thomas, the promise to stop complaining was not considered good consideration. Consideration number 2 is past consideration. If you paid a price for a promise before the promise was made, it's insufficient consideration. So for instance, if at the end of semester I promised to pay you $50 for your hard work over the semester, you actually haven't given me anything, because you've already done the work. And therefore, your consideration is insufficient. Again, timing is important in this particular issue. If the promise is made here, right, at this point in time, at T1, if your consideration happens before the promise, if you do something here, it could be anything. You wash my car. And I say, well, in consideration of you washing my car, I promise to give you $100. That $100 came after you'd done the work. So because you've already done it, you're giving me nothing for my promise. Because you can't give me something for a promise that isn't made. That's what past consideration is about. And it's something that you should be aware of, to realise that past consideration is not good consideration. Similarly, someone who is obliged to do something by the law, if there's a pre-existing legal obligation, then promising to do that is insufficient consideration. So you promise me $100 if I turn up to lectures. Okay, well, you're giving me $100. That's what you're giving me. And what am I giving you? I'm turning up to lectures. Well, I'm already obliged to do that under contract to QUT. I have a pre-existing legal obligation. I'm giving you nothing. I have to come anyway. pre-existing legal obligation, not good consideration. But really importantly, if the promisee, right, you're promising me $100, so you're the promisor and I'm the promisee. If the promisee does something beyond their legal or contractual duty. Okay, so if you promise $100 to me, if I turn up to lecture and I promise to ask you maybe at least 2 questions during class, now I'm doing something extra, right? I don't have to ask you 2 questions. That would be good consideration because I'm doing more than I contractually have to. Again, this is an area where you could run into some problems in business where someone is already obliged to do something for you and you're trying to get them to do it or they're trying to get you to do it. There's no real contract in place if you're already obliged to do it. If you want to make it contractually binding, what you have to do is do extra, as in Glasbrook Brothers and Glamorgan County Council. That was where the police did extra patrols for a business. So police have to patrol and keep the peace. They have to make sure that things aren't attacked. That's their obligation. But they maybe don't have to go past every half hour. So if you do extra, it can be good consideration. So you need to differentiate. Is it just what you're obliged to do, or is it extra or something different? Now, virtually all the time in business, you're going to need consideration to have a valid contract. Some contracts, not simple apparent contracts, but some contracts don't need consideration if you go through some legal formalities, and they're called deeds. So if you have a document that's been signed and delivered, that is the person who's making it intends to be bound and there's witnesses and often there's a specific format it needs to follow, those deeds might not have consideration. So a deed where I promise to give you $10,000 could be binding if I've done it this way, formally, in the right way. But most of the contracts we're going to deal with, well, all of the contracts we're dealing with in this subject are simple contracts, and they will require consideration.